I'm going to do my study time, my gym boss, and I'm gonna start it. 1, 2, 3, start.
I'm sure this sounds like an exaggeration, but the truth is, everything we do in single subject research design is dependent on mastering the idea of stability. So let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to start our discussion of stability by telling you about a story from when I lived in Nebraska. I was a psychologist and I had an intern who had just moved there from Mississippi. He said to me, "The weatherman here is so terrible. I mean, the weatherman in Mississippi is so much better than the one we have here in Nebraska." And I just started laughing and laughing and laughing and laughing, took a breath, and then started laughing some more. And he was a little irritated and said, "What's so funny?" When I stopped laughing, I said, "Look, I used to live in Mississippi, and it's like 90 something degrees for at least half the year. Even during winter, it only gets as low as about, oh, I don't know, 60, and that doesn't even happen that often." But I've lived in here in Nebraska for quite some time, and it has been up to 60 below with the wind chill. And I've been here during the summer as well, and it's been in the 90s and even over 100 some summers. So there's a lot of variability in the weather in Nebraska, and there's not much variability in Mississippi. Because there is not much variability in Mississippi, it's really easy to correctly predict what the weather is going to be like in Mississippi. In general, it's much easier to correctly predict what will happen next when the outcome is almost the same every single day. And he was like, "Oh, yeah, good point." So, how does this story connect to our topic of stability in single subject research design? Without stability, it is extremely difficult to predict what's going to happen next. Just like when you predict the weather, and it's really easy to predict the weather when you've got a really stable pattern of weather like you have in Mississippi, it's going to be much easier for you to predict what happened next for a client when you have a stable pattern to your data. So stability are critical. Let's go through how we actually evaluate them. So the word stability has been used in more than one way by behavior analysts. The definition I'd really like you to focus on is that stability has to do with the variability of scores around the mean for a given condition. So there are a couple of key terms in this definition. First, variability. Variability has to do with how much fluctuation there is around the mean. You'll probably already remember that a mean is an arithmetic average. So it's how variable are these data, how much do they fluctuate around the average score for the condition. When I'm talking about a condition, you again know from other coursework that you've had that we have baseline conditions and we have intervention conditions. The baseline conditions are a phase or phases in which no changes have been made to the environment. This gives us an idea of what our data look like under current conditions. In contrast, the intervention condition or intervention conditions are the phases in which a treatment has been systematically implemented. So if I want to implement an intervention or a multi-component intervention, I need to separately evaluate those data from my baseline data. Let's go ahead and look at this example. Remember that the mean is the arithmetic average for a set of scores. In this case, the mean should be calculated separately for each phase. We see here every data point, which is indicated by the circles, is set at 150 pounds. So 150 for our first data point, 150 for our second data point, and so on and so forth. So our mean is 150. Variability, as you remember, after we calculate our mean, we look at the distribution of scores around the mean. How much do our data fluctuate around the mean? In this case, we really don't see any variability. Then you'll note that in this example, the mean is represented by a solid red line. As you see, it overlaps perfectly with the mean because there's no variability. Like I said, the mean is 150 pounds. This is a stable pattern, in this case, for weight. This is what most people mean when they say they have stability. There's very little distribution of scores around the mean. Now let's look at these data. In this case, the mean is also 150 pounds, but there is a lot of variability around the mean. Some data points vary only a little bit from the mean, and other data points vary pretty considerably from 150 pounds. This is not a stable pattern of behavior. Most people don't have this wild a fluctuation in their weight from week to week. So when you think about variability, you have to also think about what kind of data you're collecting. Something like weight or IQ, I wouldn't expect it to vary considerably. So now we can finally get to the issue of stability and why it's so darned important. So we had two data sets, two different examples of baseline data. In both cases, the mean was 150 pounds. Now let me ask you, if I were to say, okay, how confident are you that next week, week 6, that the person being weighed would weigh 150 pounds? How confident would you be that I'd be right? I mean, look at that first data set, 150 pounds, 150 pounds, 150 pounds, 150 pounds, 150 pounds. I don't know about you. I'm feeling pretty confident that if I don't put an intervention in place, this person is going to weigh 150 pounds during week 6. But now let's look at that second data set that also has the mean of 150. 1 week they were at 144 pounds. The next week they jumped up to 156. Then they dropped to 152. Well, they dropped back down to 146. And now they're at 152. So how confident are you that I can predict that they're going to be 150 pounds next week? I don't know about you. I'm not all that confident.
there goes off my gym box.